All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer on the Battle of Badr. We're looking at a truly defining moment in the 7th century, a clash that literally transformed a persecuted group of exiles into a formidable Arabian state. It's an incredible story of survival, strategy, and just massive shifts in power. Whether you're looking at this from a purely historical angle or a theological one, the events of March 624 CE fundamentally altered the course of human history.
Here's our roadmap for today. First up, the road to Badr. Second, clash at the wells. Third, tactics and divine intervention. And we'll wrap up with the enduring legacy. Let's get to it. Section 1. The road to Badr. Tensions and raids. To really grasp what happened here, we have to understand the immense economic and social pressures leading up to it. This wasn't some random skirmish. It was the boiling point of years of tension.
Just mapping out the timeline, you can see how things escalated. For over a decade, early Muslims faced brutal persecution in Mecca. That's what triggered the Hijra, the migration to Medina in 622 CE. But the thing is, they arrived with basically nothing. To survive, and frankly, to hit back economically at the Meccans who had seized their homes, they started raiding trade caravans. After a few failed attempts, the Nakhla raid in early 624 was their first real success, and the first time blood was drawn. That set the stage perfectly for March 624 when the Prophet Muhammad moved to intercept this massive, wealthy caravan led by Abu Sufyan.
Now, the mismatch between these two sides is just staggering. See, when Abu Sufyan realized he was being tracked, he sent an SOS to Mecca. So instead of finding a lightly guarded caravan, the Muslims suddenly came face-to-face with a heavily armed Quraysh relief army. The Muslims had about 313 men, scraping by with 70 camels and literally just 2 horses. Meanwhile, the Quraysh, commanded by Abu Jahl, rolled in with roughly 1,000 men, boasting 100 horses, 700 camels, and completely superior armor.
313. That's the number to remember here. A vastly outnumbered, completely under-equipped group standing against 1,000 Meccan elites. I mean, in the context of 7th century tribal warfare, a disparity like that usually meant total annihilation.
Which brings us to Section 2, Clash at the Wells. Geography is destiny. Because the physical terrain and the environment dictated absolutely everything about this fight.
The geography here is a real game changer. Badr is a valley about 130 kilometers southwest of Medina, surrounded by these steep hills and huge sand dunes. Out in the desert, whoever controls the water controls the battle. It's that simple. The Muslims got there first, secured the main wells, and brilliantly filled in the rest to cut off the Quraysh's water supply. But then, overnight on the 16th of Ramadan, it poured. For the Muslims on the high ground, that rain packed down the loose sand, giving them perfectly solid footing. But for the Quraysh down below, that same rain turned their path into a muddy slog, totally neutralizing the speed and terror of their cavalry.
So how did the actual fight play out? It happened in 5 clear steps. First, obviously, securing the water. Second, following Arabian custom, they kick things off with single combat duels. The Muslim champions, guys like Ali and Hamza, just quickly dismantle the Quraysh nobles. That instantly tanks the Meccan morale while making the Muslims feel invincible. Third, the furious Quraysh launch this massive but completely disorganized charge. Step 4 is where the magic happens. The Muslims hold their ground. They lock shields in a disciplined phalanx with spears and archers just absorbing the shock. Finally, when the Quraysh momentum shatters against that wall, the Muslims launch a brutal counteroffensive and completely rout the larger army.
Moving to Section 3, Tactics and Divine Intervention, Analyzing the Victory. Now that the dust is settled and the Quraysh are running, we really need to pause and break down how on earth this actually happened.
It's the ultimate question, right? How does a force with barely any horses completely break an army 3 times its size? To be fair to the history, we need to examine this objectively, looking closely at what the primary sources actually say without just endorsing one specific narrative.
So there are essentially 2 ways to look at this victory. On the secular side, military historians point to tactical genius, locking down the wells, using the rain-hardened ground, holding that tight phalanx, and really just taking advantage of the Quraysh being wildly overconfident and disorganized. But if you look at traditional Islamic texts, they attribute the win to deep theological factors. We're talking direct divine intervention, thousands of angels fighting alongside them, and the rain being an actual blessing from God. It's super interesting how the physical, gritty tactics mirror the profound spiritual conviction of the fighters.
And that theological view is anchored in this concept of taqwa. Basically, taqwa is this profound God consciousness or mindful piety.
In Islamic tradition, that's what created such incredible unit cohesion. They fought with a single, unified purpose under Muhammad's leadership. That unity, born from taqwa, is cited as the real key to their success. And it's a huge contrast to the disunity and scrambling for loot that would end up defeating the Muslims just a year later at the Battle of Uhud.
Okay, Section 4, the enduring legacy, a transformed state. The actual combat was over in just a few hours, but the shockwaves, they immediately rewired the politics of the entire Arabian Peninsula.
The fallout was just devastating for Mecca. The Muslims lost 14 men, while the Quraysh lost around 70. And crucially, that included Abu Jahl, the head of their leadership, which left a massive power vacuum in Mecca. The Muslims also took about 70 prisoners, and the way they handled them was remarkably pragmatic. If a captive had money, they were ransomed to inject desperately needed cash into the Medinan state. If they didn't have money but could read, they literally bought their freedom by teaching Muslim kids how to read. I mean, what an incredibly forward-thinking policy for the 7th century.
And that pragmatism was baked right into how they built their state. Look at how they divided the captured wealth. Instead of a chaotic grab fest, it was highly organized. 80% went straight to the fighters to reward and maintain the military. The remaining 20% was systematically reserved for the Prophet to distribute to orphans, the needy, and travelers. This proved the new Medinan state could actually support its destitute refugees. It was the foundation of a real self-sustaining society.
Now, to keep things strictly analytical, we do have to acknowledge the modern historical debates. Some scholars note that primary sources, like Ibn Ishaq's biography, were compiled over a century after the battle. So there's a running debate that the traditional numbers might involve some rhetorical exaggeration, beefing up the disparity to really drive home that ultimate underdog narrative. But look, even if the exact headcounts are debated, the undeniable historical fact remains: a vastly smaller, defensive force completely routed an elite, established army.
So what's the bottom line? Badr was the catalyst. It proved to everyone that Medina wasn't just some safe haven for refugees anymore. It had officially arrived as a highly organized, rising geopolitical power, one that was fully ready to challenge the wealthy merchant elites of Arabia.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. When we try to understand history, especially moments that birthed global faiths, how do we balance the raw, gritty mechanics of human survival with the undeniable, enduring power of human faith? Because Badr is quite literally the ultimate case study of that balance. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.